Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. And in today's program, we are not going to talk about the current affairs. We are going to touch upon slightly a different topic in today's episode, and that relates to literature, that relates to one of the greatest icons in the history, who is known as the poet of the East, a great philosopher and thinker whose ideas have left a deep mark, especially on the political course of Indian history. And not only this, he has also inspired with his work, ideas, and philosophy many researchers, scholars, poets, and writers around the world. And today we are honored and privileged to have been joined by one such scholar, Mr. Marco Lucchesi. He's the president of the National Library of Brazil. He's a poet, he's a writer, he's a translator, he's a professor of the Federal University, and he has been serving formally as the president of Brazilian Academy of Letters, and has also published more than 40 books. Currently, he is editing a book on different phases of Iqbal's poetry. So, Mr. Marco Lucchesi, thank you very much for joining in at Views on News tonight. We really appreciate your precious time. We're really honored and privileged.
I am very happy to participate in your very special program. Thank you so much.
Okay, Mr. Lucchesi, so let me begin with this very basic question. When was the first time you ever came across Iqbal's work, whether it was philosophical work or the poetry that you came across for the first time?
That's a marvelous question. I began studying Rumi, Maulana poetry, and I made some translations from the Persian into Portuguese. But I remember that I heard the name of Iqbal. Iqbal was just for me a name. But when I found the poetry of Iqbal, the power, enlightenment poetry of Iqbal, I fell in love. So I tried to translate from Persian language some poets of him. Probably I was the first editor to publish 2 poems of him in a very important ancient magazine from the National Library many years ago. But when I read, finally, the Javid Name, I was completely, really close, like a friend, like a cousin, like a brother, because from my Italian origin, I read and studied very much the Divine Comedy and also Goethe, the Westöstlicher Divan. And so when I read Payam Mashrek, and especially Javid Name, I thought, this is my friend, this is a good master, a friend of Rumi, a friend of Goethe, a friend of Dante, so I must be his friend.
Right, Mr. Lucchesi, the 2 great works by Dr. Allama Iqbal, Payam Mashrek and Javed Nama you've just mentioned. So what particular features or the elements would you like to shed a bit of light on that you were inspired by the most?
Thank you so much. I think that it was, first of all, the capacity of making a great synthesis about the capacity of translation of the world from a poetical sense of view, or of course a philosophical one, because Iqbal made the best situation, the best dialogue, more or less a dance between philosophy, scholarship, poetry, with deep comprehension, but at the same time with a huge horizon. So a balance, very rare if you consider many friends of ours dealing with poetry and scholarship. So this was the first thing. But of course, the very important bridge, the most important, perhaps the most urgent bridge between East and West was built by his engineer capacity of dialogue. It is really amazing to see. For instance, I remember that I was shocked, but positively shocked, when Zinda, Ruth, and Rumi, after the skies, they asked, who is this madman? And Zinda Ruth said, no, Rumi said, no, he's not a madman, he's Nietzsche. And the explanation was perfect about Bridge. He said, he was misunderstood in the West, but he was a genius. But he remained just at La ilaha illallah, He didn't know everything, but he said almost La ilaha. It was very good, very important, but he could understand the second part. So for me, this is a capacity of openness, of dialogue, the possibility of admiring someone different from his religious situation and condition.
The most supreme, when we talk about the poetry or the discipline of philosophy. So out of these two, where according to your understanding, Dr. Allama Muhammad Iqbal reigns supreme? Either was it the world of poetry or the discipline of philosophy?
You know, I work also with both philosophy and poetry, but I think the capacity to renew one another situation, because for instance, beginning with poetry, of course, we had Halib, a giant. Halib is also in the skies of Iqbal. But the renewal of Dante medieval capacity of understanding the world, but in a very, very rare and in a very special path. Of course, the philosophy is very important from the beginning of his thesis about the Persian poetry, where we can understand many things. It's a very good key to understand the whole part of his work, but also about philosophy, the synthesis, and to be more deep, reviewing the Muslim thought. He is really a very revolutionary man in a very strict sense. The capacity to understand the new problems of the world and try to dialogue in a very special way with the Muslim tradition, a very deep and philosophical one, and also with new arguments from the West, criticizing many things of the West, but trying also to criticize some parts of the Eastern tradition. So his mind was so open that it was very easy to him to make a visit, going to the House of Philosophy and to the poetry, changing the names of these houses, trying to exercise the unity, the Tawhid, trying to exercise the very important choral citation. I only remember in Arabic, وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَهِ مِنْ حَبَالِ الْوَرِيدِ. That means that God is nearer than the jugular vein. That's a very good image that can translate Iqbal courage to understand the presence of God, metaphysics, but also the real life, the everyday life.
Right, Mr. Lucchesi, when we talk about the concept of God as far as the ideas, the teachings and the philosophy of Dr. Allama Muhammad Iqbal is concerned, what does he specifically try to establish? Is that about that very connection between an individual and his God?
Yes, that is a very important question. And you know probably the answer better than me. But yes, Asrar Yehudi, the selfness, it is really a very important continent from Iqbal, because Iqbal is also, yes, I know there is a huge difference of space and time, but this was a mere detail to Iqbal. Reading Rumi and understanding the great tradition of Maulana, Dr. Iqbal tried to make his name in that tradition, put his name and his considerations. Rumi, of course, Halaj, Mizra, Khalib. So, in a certain point of view, the great mystical tradition, and as you know exactly, the capacity to understand ourself, because ourself and knowing ourselves is the very important way to the intimacy. And in this region of intimacy, the dialogue with God could be deeper, wider, and in a very important sense, like many other poems and poets from your country, Latif, Boulay Shah, and others, trying to say that, you know, Mecca is there, but Mecca is inside, like Rumi. Don't go to Mecca in his very important poem. Come back, Mecca is in your heart, Mecca. So Iqbal, of course, he maintained the tradition, he respected the tradition, but he tried to understand the active part of our soul, dealing with God and dialoguing with God. So this is real a good new comprehension, and in a very modern sense also.
Right, Mr. Lucchesi, when you already mentioned Iqbal carries along that very openness of mind. Now, when we talk about Western democracy, his concept on Western democracy, do you consider him truly a bridge between the East and the West, as per Mr. Gerard Boring also?
Yes, I think that his message is still alive, and in a very important sense, because respecting the tradition and the culture of, for instance, the diversity of Pakistani culture, or the south part of Asia, but it's not just a matter of specificity, but a matter of participation, a matter of joining not only the frontier. Of course, he was the man, the most important master here in Gina to unify a new concept of country. It's okay, and he did a splendid job, as the history proves. But he also thought about a very universal ummah, or a very universal capacity of being beyond the frontiers, and a message of peace, a really message of peace. And you spoke about democracy. Yes, democracy, we must have two things, two very important things. First one is the peace, but also what kind of peace? True social justice. And this is one of the great challenges of our democracies in the world, Brazilian democracy. It means to arrive to build peace, but through social justice. I remember, if you allow me, I spoke with my great friend of Pakistan, Mr. Yusuf Khushk, the chairman of the Pakistani Academy of Letters. And this was the point we discussed many things about the capacity of poetry to transform a man, to make it in a very political, light sense. It means that read a poem of Iqbal is also a political way to understand our subjectivity and the great landscape, because we are men. We are trying to make justice not only in our countries and peace, but in the whole planet, because we are together. We are not anymore separated, and our survival in the planet depends about that lesson of Big Iqbal that I remember when he said, the sun cannot see the darkness. That's a very good principle, I think.
Right. Mr. Lucchesi, at the same time, we see a little bit of criticism of Western democracy and of that concept. So what, according to you, that irritated or irked Iqbal the most regarding the concept of Western democracy, that we see criticism of that also?
Yes, it was nice because Iqbal wrote a kind of diary being in London and in Germany, and many pages of Mars, the planet Mars. I remember the prophet of Mars criticizing some Occidental Western traditions and many situations like that. I think that the most important message from Iqbal is that we are human beings. We have a very special condition in the earth, reading the Quran al-Karim, reading many other philosophers, and you know, we have a status of the sons of God, and the idea is to equalize our situation. And when we see too many democracies, we must ask: is enough to have the same capacity to vote or the freedom to speak? Of course, it is very important, but it's not everything. We must improve real conditions to eliminate, I can say in Brazil, the poverty and many difficulties, the economical difficulties and many other things, because the democracy in abstract is very important, but we must make it more concrete. So I think that the message of Iqbal is about the dignity of man. And democracy must take in account that capacity to dignify the human being and not to make the human being in such an under condition. That was the reason also, Mr. Jawad, that I must say thank you to the Pakistani ambassador in Brazil and to the president of the Academy of Letters of Pakistan, because I decided to send some flowers to the tomb of Iqbal. And why? Because first of all, I consider him a master and a friend of mine, a kind of cousin. But also because I intend to build this bridge between our countries. We have many similarities, many differences. We have so many challenges to deep democracy. It's normal because the democracy is not something that you have already done. No, democracy every day, every year, every month we must develop, make it deep. So I send these flowers to the tomb of Iqbal to confirm his capacity of, yes, making geography, making frontiers, but making also an assembly of souls. And that is my deep feeling about Iqbal, like Hamdardi, to help someone to be. And that was the reason also that I translated 30 poems from the Payam Mashrek. I think that about poetry, love, friendship, and the great tradition of Islamic mysticism, I think that we can find a very important key to understand ourselves, not only to tolerate each another. Tolerate is a poor concept, but to admire the difference, because the future will be the capacity of admire difference and build with that differences a new road to our mutual understanding.
Right, indeed, a great gesture of sending flowers to the tomb or the mausoleum of Dr. Allama Muhammad Iqbal. We really appreciate the sentiments that you carry about the ideals of Dr. Allama Muhammad Iqbal, Mr. Lucchesi. So, Mr. Lucchesi, when we talk about the criticism of Western democracy as a concept and its implications also on the larger society, it's not only criticism, but also at the same time, Dr. Allama Muhammad Iqbal goes on to present an alternative, and that alternative is the implementation of Islamic democracy. And with that, he's confident enough that it would shape the lives of the Muslims and the people around the world when it will work out to eradicate that very problem that you have just mentioned in your take, also the poverty.
Yes, the great road of Ummah. And it was a very nice message, a message that I think that also corresponds to Walt Whitman, the very important American poet, about, he said that, yes, there are cities, there are countries, but under those cities and countries, there is the love to man, to another man, people to another people. That is the reason that qalb and love, ishq, it's a very important comprehension of Iqbal about the real life of democracy and the real dignity to make it deeper. Of course, that is a very important thing. Not forgetting religion. It's a strange situation in our Western civilization, because we have a deep heritage of Christianity and other possibilities like that one. But the idea to cancel, I think that when we are discussing our situation, democratic roles in the table, we must understand the differences and recognize the inheritance we have. I think that is not a good manner to cancel. Of course, we must balance everything. We must comprehend the limits of one and another power, how to, in our Western conception, how to make it deeper, how to establish some ethical paths. But I think that it was to Iqbal and to the Muslim community a kind of changing of paradigms, because it was very important, because Iqbal understood in a more easier situation, in a more light, I would say lighter capacity of understanding the role of the tradition, the role and religion. So I see that about democracy concerns, as far as democracy is concerned by Iqbal, that situation to remain and to go a step forward, to understand the role and to renew from inside the new roles of religions in another political situation. So I really appreciate the dialectics. Of course, we must read it and develop more other concepts to define it in a very special way. And also the role of art, because he was very attentive to make children, scholars at the school, learning to the children and go establishing the future, calling the future as soon as possible. So the formative capacity in the schools, and a special attention to the children, but really the role of art is a very important one. From the difference from Iqbal and Plato. Plato, in his Republic, he thought that the poets were not welcome, but for the Republic of Iqbal, yes, the poets are really, really welcome.
Right, Mr. Lucchesi, when we talk about the educational philosophy of Dr. Allama Muhammad Iqbal, we get to understand that he keeps well much superior to intellect and intelligence. According to your understanding, why is that so?
That's a very important question. As far as I know, the Iqbal have a special place to intuition, because many times we try to remember only about his ideas, for instance, and about his philosophical huge view and the system he built. But we cannot forget that he's the thinker of poetry, or the poet of ideas. It's not to diminish him, Iqbal. No, it's to make him recognize his huge capacity, because it's rare, very rare to see a great poet and a great philosopher together, as Dante, as I said before, as Goethe in a very special manner. So this capacity of being the poet of the mind, that is something about Allama Iqbal, gives him a very special capacity to understand how deep and how important is the role played by formation and education. His pedagogical project, coming from poetry, you know, his first soul, gives him a very rich understanding of the world and the role of education. And I think that in Brazil, for instance, and in Pakistan, we have many important challenges. We have the plurality, many languages, many different interpretations of the world. That is a rich resource that we have, both countries, Pakistan and now our country, Brazil. So also here, the capacity to make a deep democracy is through school, open schools, universities, give more resources to the people to go forward studying. So the same, Iqbal understood that religion and intelligence, scholarship and poetry, everything put together is a manner to, as I told you before, to open a great road to the future. And future and education and democracy, they are still joining very capacity of unity. I think that the idea of unity is a very important one to Iqbal, but unity that deserves his high level, not to dissolve plurality. Plurality and differences is naturally our treasure from our countries, I understand. I will go next week in the center of the rainforest in the Amazon River, and the idea is to know better the people, the indigenous traditions, because we have to improve, we must improve the differences. But as I told you before, Iqbal had an idea of unity, and the unity is through love, is through sharing values from religious situations, as Nietzsche did, but he didn't know everything, as Iqbal heard from Rumi after the skies. So I think that is the real conception of Iqbal, but his treasure is to be a poet.
Right, Mr. Lucchesi, as we see technological advancement happening, and what sort of relevance would you consider that makes to the youth of both the countries, especially when we talk about Pakistan and Brazil, of the Iqbal's ideals?
Yes, I think that we can understand many parts inspiring our time. For instance, of course, the technology, it's a very important instrument to make more democratic our countries, to improve the capacity of a very important direction to establish some points and aims to our youth, of course. But again, Iqbal wrote many important pages about the technology, our capacity to create other instruments, but not to forget, really not to forget the dignity of man. The technique, it's a very important way to develop our countries, to modernize many parts of our southern cultures, but not to lose the capacity to put the man at the center. Not to lose the capacity of understanding that the human being has a great dignity, and we must work every time to improve our dignity. So the techniques and the technology is very important, but we are more important to dominate technology and not the opposite, technology dominating our youth. So I think that is another kind of challenge, to understand that we must, of course, have many instruments, many ways to improve our capacities of reading, of doing games, of collecting books, virtual and physical books, but the center is the intelligence of men, knowing how to choose this or another book, information, fake news. This is a good news, to have a source of understanding, because as you know, in the internet now, we have a huge quantity of information, but the most important to prepare the youth is how to utilize, how to understand, how to choose what is real and what is fake. So I think that we must remember Iqbal inspiring ourselves. The technology, yes, but in the first place, the dignity of man.
Right, Mr. Lucchesi, I'm sure that you are carrying out phenomenal work as you are editing the book on different phases of Iqbal's poetry, and that is soon to be published. So would you like to share a little bit of about your book that is to be published soon?
I remember to present you now because I'm not near my library, and the first was translated in 2021. From the Persian language. I have also my Urdu exercise book, but I don't have it. I can write and read Urdu, but of course I'm step by step. I am trying to do my best, but it's not now the good situation. But this was the first book published in Brazil and probably in Latin America. I'm very proud about that. The first collect of 30 poems from the Payam Mashri, 30 quartets. The other book will appear now, April, May, more or less, from the editorial, Attar editorial, published house, and is the thesis of Iqbal from the English, studying the Persian philosophy. That's really a very, very important book. He wrote in Germany, in English, and it is really, really amazing. And of course, I'm sometimes doing some classes about Iqbal in Italy, as I gave one. I was last year in Italy. And in Brazil, sometimes I like to speak about Iqbal. I insist, especially making the comparison between Dante, that I know well because my family is from Italy. I studied, my thesis is about Dante, but a friend of Dante. And the most important thing I remember is the emotion when Dante found Virgil, a very special friendship. And also when Iqbal Zindarut met Rumi. This is really this touched my heart. I was really moved by this capacity of realizing friendship, no matter the distance of centuries. So for me, it's really a challenge, a very important fight that is inspiring also my poetry. Perhaps I'm writing something about Iqbal in my poetical work, but I will tell you after if I will be able to.
For sure, we'll really look forward to that. And Mr. Lucchesi, you already mentioned that you are trying to learn Urdu also. So is there anything that you would like to say in Urdu, a couple of phrases or sentences or anything?
No, no, I cannot remember by heart, but I remember two very important words that make Brazil, Portugal, and Pakistan together. For instance, chave is the word Portuguese to say key. And I remember that when I was in Islamabad, I was deeply touched seeing this name where the man, the key man that prepared that for us. And I remember the name masjid, or in Arabic, but Georgia, from igreja, from the Portuguese ancient tradition. So through the words of our common heritage, I think that we have a very important word, key, chave. So with this metaphor, I think that, yes, I love very much Urdu, and I love the elegance of letters, and the way to Nastaliq is a splendid, beautiful manner to write poetry, and not only poetry, but it's a pity that I don't have here my book, but next time I will show. I'm not a good calligrapher. No, I'm very bad calligrapher, but I love the elegance of your language. Next time I will have something by heart to say to you.
We wish you all the best in this particular endeavor. So you all also mentioned that when you were here in Pakistan, how was the experience when you got to meet people, when you got to experience the culture here in Pakistan? How did you feel? What were your feelings?
It was an amazing experience because I was in Italy and I was invited, I must say, my friend, the chairman of the Pakistani Academy of Letters. We began many months before, during pandemics, and I wrote to Mr. Husk. We were not friends at that time. Now we are brothers. And he invited me to a conference. It was really amazing because I had the dream to reach Pakistan because of the poetical readings. You have a treasure of poetry. And when I arrived, I remember, for instance, many pilgrims coming from Mecca, receiving flowers at their necks at the airport. And it was amazing to see, first at the Academy of Letters, to see the difference of tongues, of languages. And I think that political condition to develop more and more different languages in Pakistan is really a very nice comprehension. And it was nice to find many poets and novels and, youth writers. It was really a very important key, again, of understanding a part of Pakistan. It was a pity, just 3 days, but I will come again, and then I will be in Lahore to say some words to Iqbal in his ears, thanking him for the great understanding he gave to us, and the real tradition of the Pakistani poetry, Latif, Shah Bulleh. My God, you have a plenty difference of great poets. This is also my house, and I will be there to say thank you to many different poets.
Right, Mr. Lucchesi, so when do we expect and look forward to you coming and visiting Pakistan once again, so that we could have you in the studio and talk to you face to face?
It will be my great pleasure. Tanzih and Tashbih, the Quranic expression of God, the distance and to be near. That's a very good understanding of the mystery of God and of poetry, but also of our friendship that we are building it now. The real bridge between Pakistan, I am far, really far, but I will be near. The same poetry of Rumi is a strange situation. You are in Khorasan and I am in other part of the world. that is also Maulana and is also Allama Iqbal. We are together, we are near, but in the future, face to face. I will be very happy, Mr. Jawad, to be with you in the studio.
It would be a great honor once again to have you with us in the studio very soon. I expect that. Now, when we talk about the cultural exchange between Pakistan and Brazil, how crucial is that in order to understand each other's culture and do something about it? Are there any efforts being done in that sphere also?
Yes, I think that first of all, it is to establish, to build the South epistemology, a new epistemology of South. Of course, we have different traditions, but we have many common points. We have in Brazil more or less more than 200 languages. We have different cultures with Indian original people. We have also that capacity of being a new nation, as Pakistan is new, but new in a capacity of refresh and change and maintain many things. So I think that the first is the program of translation. And I think that translation poets, as I began to do here in Brazil, it's a very important way, because poetry is a real manner to understand different perspectives, different languages, and it's a very cheap program to establish. I think that we must also urge to understand and to make many seminars, as it was done by the Pakistani Academy of Letters, between intellectuals from our countries. We have many sources. We have the universities. I think that we can develop alliances among different universities from Pakistan and from Brazil, because we really must understand that the multilateralism, not only two great powers in the world, but the multilaterality is very important to develop plural capacities of dialogue and economic exchanges. So I think that we can make alliance with our institutions and to establish a South epistemology. It means that we can contribute, as Iqbal done, the epistemology of South. It means the voice of the South, trying to renew with our difference from peripheral or multicentrical situation of ours that give us more rich understanding of the world, more important contributions, because we have the difference in our body. We have the difference in our souls, in our countries. So I think that we must be hard more and more to make more rich the concert of nations.
Right, Mr. Lucchesi, so one last thing. You're serving as the president of the National Library of Brazil, that happens to be the 7th largest in the entire world. So are there any initiatives already undertaken by this National Library of Brazil vis-a-vis Pakistan on the literary front, to be more specific?
I think that we must work together because it's a very rich library, as you said, as you mentioned, and probably we have many things about Pakistan. I think that researchers could work establishing this bridge. As I told you before, I was the editor many years ago. I was not the president at the presidency, and we published in a very important review some poetry of Pakistan. But it was a little part because it was hard to find translators at that time. But I think that probably with different researchers, we have great treasures there. It is a good idea. Thank you for giving me this idea. I hope that we can do something, of course.
Pleasure is all mine. I'm Mr. Marco Lucchesi, President of the National Library of Brazil, currently editing book on different phases of Iqbal's poetry. You are a poet, writer, and translator, and you published more than 40 books. It was really an honor and privilege to have you on a board, and it was really an enlightening discussion, and we really wish you the best in your endeavor of learning Urdu as well as we look forward to your this book that you are editing, that is to be published soon. Thank you once again very much for being with us on Views on News tonight. We really appreciate your precious time. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.